Hey everyone, it's Stacy from My Petite Garden. Welcome back. I want to wish everyone a wonderful new year, and today I will be sharing with you guys an updated Hoya collection video. I think I've previously done about 2 other videos like this, so if you're interested in seeing how my collection have changed over the years, I'll link those videos in the description down below. I'll also be including the few Discidias that I have in this video as well, since Hoyas and Discidias are pretty much family. Needless to say, my plant collection have downsized by quite a bit, which also translates to a downsize in my Hoya collection. I would say that I have really curated the plants in my space to ones that truly fit my lifestyle right now, and ones that I am really happy to see every day in my home. Anyways, I hope you enjoy this video and let's get started. And please don't forget, if you enjoy my content, consider subscribing and leaving me a like and a comment, because I really do enjoy hearing from you guys. Starting off, here is my Discidia Ovata. It gets a beautiful sunstress color on the foliage, as you can see here on the crown of my plant. I also really love the succulent-like leaves on it. I've had some people mention to me that my plant seems to have much more thicker leaves than a regular Discidia Ovata. I'm not sure if that's true, and if so, I'm honestly not sure why that is. The plant that I have here is trailing pretty long, and at one point it almost touched the floor, so I did end up propagating this plant for the first time recently. So we'll see how well it propagates in water for me. Next is another Discidia. This is the Discidia Lanceolata. I really love how odd this plant looks, and I don't really see it around much, or I don't see people talking about it much. It's a very minimal looking plant, and it has these propeller-like foliage. I think personally for me, the appeal is really just how simple this plant looks, and I really enjoy and appreciate the simplicity of the structure of this plant. Here is my Hoya Vertistilada. This one has very hardy leaves that can have beautiful splashing, and the color on that splash can vary from pink to purple to silver depending on the type of lighting that it gets. On my plant, I seem to have a variation of different colors of splashing, so that's really nice to see. Then we have here the Hoya Kanyaku Mariana. It's another fairly odd looking Hoya. I would consider this as a small leafed Hoya where the foliage has ruffled edges and the leaves feel almost cardboard-like. I find that this particular Hoya looks very whimsical, and I think that's kind of the appeal of it to me, at least. And I really enjoy looking at it because it's just not a typical Hoya you would see, and the way that the foliage is, the way it flows, and the way it drapes, I love everything about it. This is my Hoya Bilobaro. I have a fairly large one, and it honestly grows really nicely, and I would consider this a pretty fast grower for a Hoya. I find that the shape of the leaves on this particular Hoya is very adorable. It's kind of teardrop shaped, and it has a very nice texture to it, and also a sheen to it if you look at it under a certain lighting. And if you look very closely, you can actually see some very faint veining on the leaves. If this plant gets enough light, the leaves will have this dark outer margin, as you can see here, which I find very attractive. Next is a small-leaved Hoya called Hoya Carmela. A pretty tough one for me to grow. I think I've mentioned this in previous videos as well. I've had this Hoya, like most of my Hoyas, for a good few years, and this one here is probably the fullest it's been for me, and that says a lot because it's still a very tiny plant. It does have very dainty, cute, roundish foliage, and I think that was part of the reason why I'm drawn to this plant. Right now I'm just happy to see that it's actually actively growing, and you can see some brand new leaves here. This is my Hoya Pachyclada. This Hoya is one of the Hoyas that are now much more widely available. Mine grows like a weeping bonsai, which I find pretty funny and charming at the same time, but it does get hard to keep it upright without flopping over in the pot sometimes. I think that the foliage on this one is pretty understated with some very faint veining on it, and at the same time I feel like it's also very underrated Hoya. It is beautiful in its simplicity, and I guess it will take someone who can appreciate that to really love it. This one here is the Hoya Gloriana. This pot is actually full of cuttings that I took off of my mother plant, which I have sold a couple of years back. This is one of my favorite small-leaved Hoyas, although it does get a bit temperamental when I move it around. So I would say in my whole collection, this is probably one of the harder Hoyas to maintain and keep growing well. But if you manage to get it done right, it does reward you with some very beautiful leaves, and I think it's just a very beautiful plant in general. This one here is my Hoya Honey. This Hoya gets the most beautiful sunstress when you give it enough light. The foliage turns this bright red color, and in contrast with the veins, it's just absolutely stunning. I was actually unsuccessful in trying to sunstress this under grow lights, but it did get sunstressed on my south-facing window during the spring and summertime. So if any of you have a south-facing window, I would say that it's probably your best bet for sunstressing your Hoyas. And now that I have it back under lights during the winter time, I do notice that some of the color is starting to fade, especially on the bottom. Another Hoya that I managed to sunstress on my south-facing window is this Hoya Akuda Red. This one turns more of a dark red color, which almost looks slightly purple. And again, now that it is under lights and not natural sunlight, the color is starting to fade a little bit. So I kind of just can't wait for spring and summer to come so I can place these back onto my windowsill and have the color as vibrant as it was during that time. This one here is my Hoya Akuda Pink. This one is a good grower in my opinion, and the foliage is very attractive with the veining that runs through the leaves, making it look very nicely textured. The color on mine at least is a bit of a chartreuse green, or it's on the lighter green side, but I have noticed that the new foliage that comes out, it does start off with a darker color, and then it somehow fades to a lighter green. So I'm not sure if it's just my plant or the lighting that it gets in my home. Next is my Hoya Cantiana Lin. It has beautiful variegation, and what makes this Hoya stand out is that hot pink margin wrapped around the white and the green variegated foliage. This is another one that I like to keep by my south-facing window during spring and summer, which gives the color more intensity, and I think this particular one also does fairly well under lights, which is where I have it now for the winter time. This next one is actually a Hoya that I acquired recently, and the first Hoya I got in probably over a year. This is a Hoya Sigilladus. This was actually a Hoya that I have had my eyes on for a pretty long time, but I just never came across a specimen that I felt was worthy of picking up for the price. That is until I saw this one up for grabs in a local Facebook group. I have heard that this can be pretty finicky to keep, so we'll see how it grows with me. I love the splashy elongated foliage, and when it's sun-stressed, the color is actually really pretty as well. I don't plan on repotting this one until probably spring or summer. It's currently sitting in its nursery pot, and the soil is pretty good, so I don't feel a need to repot it right away since it is the middle of winter and this Hoya is known to be finicky, so I'm just gonna try to avoid having to stress it out anymore. Next is my Hoya Retusa, which you guys have probably seen many times in my videos. This has become a staple in my home, and it's also become one of those plants that I honestly don't have to pay much attention to anymore, and it just still seems to be able to stay very happy on its own. I actually don't want this to grow anymore. I kind of really like the size that it's at this moment. It just perfectly kind of drapes in this corner, and I love the way it looks, so I probably will keep it in this pot to hopefully prevent it from getting any much larger than what it is right now. This is my Diskidia cherry, which I actually just recently featured in my previous video where I highlighted some resilient houseplants. This has got to be one of my current favorite plants in my home. Not only does it look very aesthetically pleasing, but it does also grow exceptionally well with very little care required. And I also love the coin-like foliage, as you guys know already. I think this is probably one of the prettiest hanging plants in my home right now, so I really enjoy looking at it every day. This next one is my Hoya Carnosa Stardust, which is currently looking very wonky because, to be very honest, I really have neglected this one. Some of the older leaves, as you can see, were a bit deformed. I'm not sure if it's due to pests or something else, but I looked the plant over and I didn't really see any pests, but I think the newest foliage are fine. This Carnosa is supposed to have pink splashing on the leaves, which I am hoping now that I am truly caring for it again, it will start putting out nicer leaves. Next is another Hoya Carnosa. This is the Hoya Carnosa Narrow, which basically just means that the foliage is a little more narrow and slimmer than your average Hoya Carnosa. This is sadly another one that I have kind of neglected for quite some time now, but we are back on track. The foliage also has some slight splashing or speckling on it as well, and I honestly think this one makes a beautiful trailing vining plant, if taken care of properly, of course. And there are currently multiple active growth points on it, so I am excited to see that it knows that I am caring for her again, so that makes me happy. And lastly, here is my Diskidia Ohientavaragata. In my opinion, this is another very aesthetically pleasing Diskidia that really looks nice in a plant space. The foliage has a white outer variegation with a green center. And I think that covers all of the Hoyas and Diskidias that are currently in my collection. Thank you guys for watching all the way to the end, and if there are any that you noticed were not in this video but were in my previous videos, chances are I either sold it or passed it on to friends. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this little Hoya plant tour, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.